name is Paul Glumaz, and I'm with the LaRouche Political Action Committee. And this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. And today is May 24th, 2017. Okay, and right now, I believe the president has just met with Pope Francis, and Pope Francis and his environmental and his enthusiasm has given Trump his book encyclical and his book on ending in the industrial development of the world in order to protect Mother Earth. So this is not a very good situation. This Pope is not all there, and this is sort of characteristic of Trump's trip to the Middle East, and then to Jerusalem, and then to Rome. It's many different things which have a strange and farcical nature, which may be necessary from the standpoint of Donald Trump to provide stability for Trump at home. So a lot of what I believe is going on with the Trump trip is while there is an intention to have peace, he's also got to, in order to have peace, Trump has also got to consolidate his position at home, because he can't have peace if he doesn't do that. So it's a very strange situation where Trump met with the Saudis and concluded a whopping military deal in the hundreds of billions of dollars, of which a good almost 200 billion immediately, for arms, at the same time that the Saudis are exterminating the Yemeni population, and they're paying for and arming all of these mercenaries who are fighting for them in Saudi Arabia. The Saudis don't believe in fighting; they believe in paying people to fight. And so here you have Donald Trump speaking to the heads of state of many Arab nations about a grand coalition to fight ISIS and terrorism, when some of those nations present are the very nations that helped to create and fund these terrorist organizations. So that's a kind of a strange sort of situation. And then on top of that, Trump accused Iran of being the principal sponsor of terrorism in the Middle East. And nothing could be more absurd, because Iran is the primary defender against these terrorist organizations, especially in Syria. Iran is one of the nations fighting this terrorism to prevent the spread of this terrorism, and along with Syria, the Syrian government. So he's naming the nation which is probably playing the most key role in that area fighting terrorism as the primary terrorist organization. And of course, this plays big with this whole Sunni thing and the Shia Sunni thing, because Iran has become a serious nation economically, militarily, and so forth. And they're also the very key nation in the whole connection between Europe and Asia in the One Belt, One Road. So this is sort of and the same thing with was presented in Israel. So the question is, do you now have a de facto Israeli Sunni Arab alliance to resolve the Palestinian issue at the expense of Iran, at the expense of Iran? Now, it's very interesting that Iran had just elections this week, and they re-elected this moderate cleric, Rouhani. And his response to all of this was very interesting. He said, you can't resolve the Middle East situation without taking into account Iran. Iran has to be part of the process. And he's absolutely correct, number one. Number two, Iran is part of the process in the Astana discussions that are going on in Kazakhstan over the Syrian situation. So the U.S. is somehow involved as an observer in those situations about setting up these safe zones, and at the same time that Russia and the U.S. are working this deconfliction situation, which is getting very complicated. So the other thing Rouhani mentioned is that the Saudis were involved in 9/11, and also he mentioned that that the power of a nation doesn't come from how much money they have, or how much or how much military armament they have, but in the fact that the people have a voice in their government through the elections, and which is the case in Iran and Syria. So there is this very farcical situation, and Rouhani also made it very clear that he is waiting for the United States to settle that for the presidency of the United States to develop a continuity. So he's not taking this attack on Iran in the way that you would in a defensive way, but is saying, we're going to wait for things to settle in the U.S. administration. So what is going on is that in the U.S. What is going on is that on the ground, ISIS is being defeated, but the problem with defeating ISIS is their people just go to other parts of the world. So this thing is not resolved. Meanwhile, the president of the Philippines cut short his trip to Russia to go back to his country to put martial law on Mindanao, because it's conveniently the terrorists that have been sent in there in the Philippines, or been developed in the Philippines, the same ISIS, is now unleashing chaos in Mindanao. So why? Well, Duterte made it very clear that he likes Trump, he's willing to work with Trump, but the U.S. so far has been double dealing. They have been undermining the Philippines, and that his country was very close to being destroyed, and he has declared a war on the drug trade, and he has decided to defend the Philippines against this attack. And it's coming from the drug trade, and it's also coming from the drug financed international ISIS type operations. So he's fighting, and so he went back to the Philippines. So it's not a coincidence that this is going on in the context. So those nations which are not going along with the program are being targeted. And then you had the Manchester event bombing, and the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Theresa May, has suspended campaigning in the elections. So the elections, as far as I know, have not June 8th in Britain have not been suspended. But there is a situation inside Great Britain where Jeremy Corbyn of the Labour Party is getting massive support from the population, though he doesn't have that kind of support within his own party. So it's a very interesting situation. It has an analogy as a phenomenon to what was going on in the United States. And this begs one to wonder, is the terrorist attack and the suspension of campaigning a feature of trying to prevent Corbyn from pulling an upset in the British elections? And that's a good question. But the British are definitely freaked out, and they are definitely in a very dangerous mode, and they are definitely moving with their assets to run a coup against Trump, to try to keep Corbyn from becoming prime minister. And from trying to prevent uh, other nations from being able to be part of the One Belt One Road. Now the key thing right now is that the One Belt One Road is taking off, and the conference, which was held May 14th, May 15th, we're just starting to see the ramifications of that conference. Now, Helga Zepp LaRouche was one of the speakers at a number of the side conferences that were one of the think tank aspects of the conference, and the Schiller Institute, which she is the founder of, was very well received and very well known in China at this point among the policy layers, and the whole world is being reshaped around the One Belt One Road process. All the nations that were there were all working out deals with China for their participation in the One Belt One Road. Now you have to understand how the Chinese do this. They have a free trade agreement with Australia. It's not a free trade agreement. It's an agreement between Australia and China to trade in certain items without the interference of customs duties and things like that, so that there can be a swift exchange of goods. A similar free trade agreement is being negotiated right now with Canada, and a similar free trade agreement would be proposed to be negotiated with the United States. Now, the free trade agreement with Canada that's being negotiated was not, the Canadians were not at all interested in a free trade agreement with China until the Trump administration came in and is beginning to take down the whole NAFTA agreement. And before the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is the alternative to what the Chinese are doing, was shut down. So now the Chinese are working out preferential trade agreements with Canada, which is integrated into the United States economically, at the same time that NAFTA is being reorganized or taken down. And so what you're ending up with is a much more of an orientation for Canada and for the United States to cease being post-industrial economies, basically living off the cheap labor of other countries and the prominence of the US dollar, to countries which can use their skill potentials in their workforce to restart manufacturing for export. But where would all these manufactured exports go to? Well, the One Belt One Road is going to open up all these parts of the world, throughout Africa and Asia, and that alone creates opportunities for development, and that opportunity for development means there has to be a massive increase of manufactured capital goods that have to be exported to those parts of the world which do not have the capability to develop them themselves, and in exchange for raw materials, in exchange for other things, in exchange for development. So this is huge, and this is a huge potential for the United States to begin to transform its economy, which is not going to be easy, to a manufacturing export, to the opportunities that are going to emerge on the One Belt One Road. That's what's possible. At the same time, the Chinese can help rebuild American infrastructure, because if you're going to do that, you have to rebuild U.S. infrastructure, because your U.S. infrastructure is a problem in New York City or all over the country, is a huge impediment to the efficiency of having such an economy. You have to have a modernization of U.S. infrastructure. You have to have high-speed rail become the norm in the United States. We have no high-speed rail. And you're going to have to deal with the Koch brothers, who are trying to stop all high-speed rail, have putting millions and millions of dollars into trying to stop high-speed rails, because they're totally oriented towards a car-based economy. Anyhow, but the important point here is, how is the Chinese financing all this? A lot of people want to know, how are the Chinese financing? Well, they have a lot of state-owned banks. The state-owned banks make a loan. Uh, the project's bonds are sold. The state-owned banks and others pick up the pay, and the state-owned banks profit from the loans. Go is there's it comes back as more loans. So they can issue as much credit as they can get construction and development and infrastructure and economic activity, because it's all backed up by the economic activity, by the expansion. The money, the money's good because when you issue a loan, you create money. The money circulates, and it can expand as much as you can expand the real economic activity. There is no debt crisis in China. The Western media is saying there's a debt crisis. They have all this debt. Well, that debt is circulating as credit. It's not. It's not in the offshore banking system being used. It's not being speculated with. So essentially, what's happening right now is that in the West, everything's on privatization. Everything is on maximizing profit by selling the public sector to the private sector, and then using loans to buy the public sector, and then getting a return on those loans. Private-public partnerships are based on that approach, where like the infrastructure plan, infrastructure fund that Trump has been talking about, or his economic advisor talking about, is a form of a private-public partnership, and that's not going to work because you need a return on your investment, and the only way you're going to get a return on your investment is to extract from the population the payment for the return. When if you just went ahead and issued the credit and built these things through public credit, there is no you don't need to have a return because you're building the country up, and that's your return. You have a physical return. You don't have to pay it all back right away. You don't have to service it because it's public credit. And this is the whole point. This is what greenbacks were. This is what the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, FDR, that rebuilt the country during the Depression. This is what the Chinese are doing every day. This is what the U.S. has to do. But this is totally outside the boundaries of the conceptual, ideas of what an economy is. And it means taking on Wall Street. It means taking on the City of London. It means ending their power. And of course, Glass-Steagall would go a long ways to doing that, breaking up the banks. But breaking up the banks would not be enough. The United States must establish a credit system. And that's what Trump is going to have to do. Because if he can't deliver on the necessary economic development, he's not going to be functional. And he's going to have to do that. And this is the only way to do it. And so the Chinese are demonstrating how you do it. There's no reason why the United States could not itself do this, or any other country could do this in this way. That's what government is for. Government is for promoting the general welfare, and the best way government can promote the general welfare is to issue credit for development. And the credit is good because the development actually expands the physical economy, expands the productive powers of the population, expands the amount of activity, expands the amount of products that are in circulation. That's how Hamilton, that's how Lincoln, that's how FDR, that's how it's done. And if it's not done that way, it can't be done. So we're still a ways from that, and that's where Trump has to go. And Trump has to consolidate his position. Now we go into the realm of hysteria. The Democrats and this new movement called Resist is planning to go into marches all over the country to impeach Trump. And Hillary Clinton has, signed on, and this is a complete soap opera, This is a soap opera. The the crimes that Trump has committed are not even crimes. They're allegations of Russia this, Russia that, Russia, colluding with Russia. That's not even a crime. Alan Dershowitz, the civil rights attorney, very popular, very famous, is saying that's not a crime. What they're claiming that Trump did is not a crime. Okay, the whole thing is a soap opera. It's a fake morality play in which they're condemning Trump as an agent of Russia. Time magazine had this incredible cover of blood-stained White House with the Kremlin on top of it. I mean, this thing has really gone nuts, and it's like a thought crime. It's like Trump is guilty of a thought crime. You know, he's bad. Therefore, we have to get rid of him. You have all these Congress people, all these Democratic Congress people, like Maxine Waters and others, saying he's bad. We have to get rid of him. Or did he commit a crime? No. Well, maybe he did, but we haven't proved it yet. But we still got to get rid of him anyhow. And this is what mass demonstrations are going on. I know people who voted for Trump who are Democrats, who cannot tell their children that they voted for Trump because the children will not speak to them again. That's how severe the situation is. So this thing is going to play out. It's still going to play out, and then you have this whole new wrinkle of Seth Rich, who was murdered, and who allegedly was in touch with WikiLeaks, and all of this stuff's on his computers, and the question is he the actual person who leaked the WikiLeaks? And this guy Kim.com, who's a very strange figure, is coming out saying that he was in touch with Seth Rich, and that yes indeed, and he's willing to testify, and blah blah blah. So this is all getting more muddy and more convoluted as we go. There's one investigation and then investigating another investigation, investigating another investigation, and it's starting to become difficult to follow. It's so convoluted, and now you have a special counsel, and the special counsel is investigating, and then it's just getting to the point where you can't it's just one big daisy chain of investigations of investigating each other, and it's you get to a point where the population says, I've had enough, please, enough is enough. Let's get on with the business of existing. Let's get on with the business of having a nation. Let's get on with the existing elected president and see what he can do. But there's a deep reason for why there's such a massive freakout against Trump, and it has nothing to do with anything Trump has done. It has to do with two different aspects. One is that Trump has violated the accepted way people think things are done, and as people have been conditioned by the media and by the political class to think about how the image of how candidates are, or how politicians have to be in order to get elected. And he's completely violated all of that, and that has caused tremendous cognitive disruption among that layer of the population, which feels that that they have been that their expected perceptions have been violated by his Trump. So we get a lot of people say, I voted for Trump, but I don't like the way he talks, I don't like what he says, and so forth. And then you have the incredible, on a deeper level, you have the incredible rage against Trump, because he's somebody who believes in building things. He's somebody who is not just abrasive, but he believes in getting things done. And there's this cynical malaise that is responding in extreme rage against the optimism and that Trump exhibits. So everything will be fine. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And these people go absolutely berserk psychologically over the optimism that he's trying to project, the optimism that he's trying to instill in a population that's somewhat demoralized. This is causing extreme rage within not just the elites, but the media, the people like Stephen Colbert, best example that, where he went on this complete diatribe against Trump, and then said the only thing that good that Trump's mouth is for is to place Putin's what in his mouth, and that kind of extreme rage against Trump is beyond the pale of even the most decadent and degenerate, cynical, humor. And so this is totally enraging, and it's and so you have all these people out there whose passions are being aroused in different ways. But the deep is the hatred of progress. The deepest passion of all is the hatred of progress. The fact that Trump even believes in progress, he believes in progress, is a trigger for the deepest form of rage that you can imagine in these layers.